Okay. Okay, we're recording. But again, welcome, Jess, and great to have you. And thank you so much for doing this on Zoom so our online faculty can attend as well. Um, and then the community that couldn't be here today can listen to the presentation that they've missed. But this is a really cool presentation. Jess is also going to be highlighted in our faculty newsletter for the month of November. Um, as some really great things that she's been doing. And Sean, definitely with your show, hopefully we can highlight you that way as well. But there's so many great things that grant money has done for our faculty, and this is just a really great example. So Jess, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks, everyone. Good to see you all. My name is Jess Moore. I'm a faculty member in the Foundations Department, and I am a full-time RVer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my life, what my work is outside of school, and talk about my summer, which included 3 artists in residencies. So this was taken about 3 years ago, maybe a little longer. I passed through Grand Teton fairly often in the last 7 years is how long I've been online. So to me, going to the mountains is going home. This is a John Muir quote. I am originally from Maryland, and when I arrived here in Colorado, I just absolutely fell in love with access to the outdoors, the mountains, and the conifers. Um, and so that started as a young person in Maryland. And this is New Germany State Park. This little squirrel over here, she's going to come up again. But just loving that old architecture style buildings built by the CCC early in the 1940s, getting out in nature. And then, of course, this is our backyard here in Colorado. So spent a lot of time when I was living in Denver coming up to that mountain range in this national park, Rocky Mountain National Park. As life throws you a few curveballs, I chose to go to be a Girl Scout camp counselor after a layoff. And so I spent time as the photographer at camp, being outside, capturing the joy of camp with girls, and then started being involved in something that they launched called the Outdoor Adventure Club. So we would do 1 weekend a month activities across our state, dog sledding, rock climbing, um, all sorts of adventures. Well, I was just talking about the whitewater rafting trip we did in Salida um, a while back. So this really was the opportunity that got me to thinking about a different lifestyle. I was out every day um, hiking this 880-acre camp. It's Pike National Forest was the location of the camp, and this rock climbing picture shows the peak kind of in that. And part of being outside all day helped me see how the light changed on the surfaces, the trees, the mountains, and that started building my body of work. And so this is just one of those funny camp images. So I was making laser cut layered wood pieces, and I opened my business in 2016, creating pieces and have different sizes, which has definitely expanded over the years, and started doing art shows in mountain towns. And I was thinking about um, how do I shift with being in Denver in an apartment and going across multiple mountain towns during the summer and fall and winter to set up my booth to do sales, um, and balance paying hotel fees for all of those places. And I just made the leap into full-time RVing. So I would go to these places each week, spend a week in the town, make my work during the off days, and then do the shows on the weekends. So I was combining how to live that full-time life with the travel in the summer and the fall, and then what the off season would look like. And what I came up with was a plan to do volunteering in national parks. So I would head out to these wild places and volunteer. And usually, volunteer positions last about 3 months. In exchange for a free site, you get to work in some capacity with the park. I typically always chose visitor services roles. So, being in a visitor center, um, working with the interp team, and engaging the public that way. I loved it because then I could have my own private rangers telling me all of the things about the parks, their picks for hikes to go on, or um, learning about the flora and the fauna from their perspective. And I just thoroughly enjoyed it. So I started out in Arizona volunteering. I was at Fort Bowie National Historic Site, Chiricahua National Monument. I went down to Big Bend National Park in Texas. Um, and then I chose to go up to Alaska, and I worked at Alaska Maritime National Wildlife Refuge, and that I want to get back to Alaska. It was an amazing opportunity. Um, in between all of those different positions, I did try on the flat hat. I just like the flexibility of being a volunteer a little bit more. Um, so I started making connections with some folks at Bridger Teton National Forest. And that's the forest that sits just east of Grand Teton National Park. So I volunteered there last summer, and I had most every intention of going back to be there in the summer. It's not a bad place at all to be able to wake up, be 8 miles from the front or the east entrance of Grand Teton National Park, and also be in a landscape that is pretty flexible with usage for the resource. National parks and national forests look at the land a little differently. Um, so, as I mentioned, I had every intention of going back, but I decided to take some time and really try to apply for artist in residence. The thing about volunteering is that you have to put the hours in. And I wanted to try to put hours into being at these public places doing what I wanted to do. And so taking that art focus and hopefully working with the public, and then being inspired and making my own body of work. So that's what happened in January. I made that decision. I called my manager and I said, I'm going to try to send in some applications and just try to work my connections from all of my time in other public lands. Um, During this general time frame, there was also a shift with my business. In COVID, I decided to step away from doing art shows and move into doing more wholesale. And so now, instead of doing the week to week shows, I'm doing 2 trade shows a year. So that's kind of a piece to the puzzle. I am doing a trade show with the Public Lands Alliance, and that is a great group for getting in front of the people that can have my work in their shops. So at this point, as I'm starting to apply to artist in residence, I am thinking about my goals. And my goals for an artist in residence is to work on a new body of work. I have about 250 listings on my wholesale shop at this point, and that's great. That's fine. But as an artist, I can't stop. Can't stop, won't stop. And so I was being inspired by techniques with incorporating embroidery with photography. And so I started on that probably a year ago, thinking about just how that concept would come together, thinking about patterns and what type of photography would work, and how I could incorporate the two. The other piece of the puzzle with a lot of public lands artists in residence is that they want to have some sort of public presentation. I can certainly deliver a presentation, but I wanted to involve the public differently. And so I came up with presenting. My pitch was to do engagement with having people come and do sessions for watercolor nature journaling. So as I mentioned, no more volunteering behind a desk, so to speak, or in front of the public answering questions on like where the restrooms are, but in interacting in a more meaningful way for me as an artist and educator. So I ended up applying to 6 public land units. And for anyone kind of dipping your toes into that realm, I highly recommend creating a spreadsheet. Every park service unit or forest or BLM land is operated independently. And so they're going to have their own staff, their own timelines, their own qualifications, their own different types of housing or offerings as far as time frame goes. So the spreadsheet was great in categorizing everything as far as all of the timelines and what would be needed to do that particular artist in residence. Um, so the hitch in my giddy up is that I have an RV. Um, this is my home. I have my dog. And so I was limited in some regards. A lot of times, while housing is provided, it's going to be a dorm room or a cabin. Rocky Mountain National Park has a cabin that they've just restored, but that cabin or those types of housing opportunities don't allow pets. So sure, yep, I probably could find a place for my kiddo, but she comes with. So that's what my hurdles were with looking into that. Um, as I mentioned, my business is a member of the Public Lands Alliance. So this is one of the trade shows that I do. And while I was there, I started not only to talk about my work and how I could do custom items for different places, but also how I could partner with them to offer this opportunity for working with the public through an art lens. And I connected with a couple different team members. There was DC Booth National Historic Fish Hatchery, Desert National Wildlife Refuge, Cedar Breaks National Monument that's in Utah. We struck up a conversation, and I think a lot of people are interested in seeing how to interpret the environment and the landscape a little differently than a typical ranger talk. Um, and so I ended up moving forward with a few of those opportunities this summer. So the week of March 10th, 3 things happened. I was accepted to the 3 different artist residents. I received an acceptance letter from Bighorn Canyon National Recreation Area, that's in Wyoming. My contact from PLA from the DC Booth National Historic Fish Hatchery reached out and offered me an artist in residence. And then my manager from Bridger Teton National Forest circled back and she said, "What do you think about a hybrid role where you do an artist in residence and work at the front desk?" Well, twist my arm to get me back to that area of the country. I went ahead and did that. And so that was um, for, I started there in August. So for visual reference, here's where those 3 places are located. So Spearfish, South Dakota, sort of middle of the state for Bighorn Canyon, and Bridger Teton in the northwest corner of Wyoming. So this was my first one starting at the beginning of June at Bighorn Canyon. And we've got 2 great participants here. I went with a palette that was easier to work with. I would have preferred, I love this little palette on the table, but the larger palette, we touched a little bit about color theory. This was definitely offered to beginners. No one needed to have any sort of art background, any type of skill, but just being observational in place, in situ with, so to speak, in plein air with these folks. Um, and so this was Ewing Snell Ranch on the recreation area. This is a smaller town in Wyoming where we publicized it. And each little public land unit had really interesting hurdles on how to communicate the workshops. Each group used flyers or social media. And so I did two workshops here, both on Saturdays, from kind of taking a drop-in approach between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. So here's some more pictures of the attendees. And as a person coming to a public land, I was considered a volunteer. This is partly due to kind of workman's comp and insurance and liability reasons. So you do end up signing a waiver. I've signed quite a few, so that was no problem for me. And then as far as my work, I was out taking hikes each day. This particular recreation area has this beautiful canyon with this body of water. You can boat down it. So I kayaked. I was up at the crack of dawn one morning, which is not typical for me. So I got this beautiful reflection of the water and started working through these patterns and these embroidery pieces on the photography. This is getting into one of their other historic sites. This is the Lockhart Ranch. So Caroline Lockhart was a character in the 1800s who came to this area. Also lived in Cody, so she knew Buffalo Bill. And so she had this great brand. I don't know if you can see it on the on her chimney is the L/heart. And so I added that brand to this piece just to have that connection. My second artist in residence was at the a national fish hatchery. This was built in 1899, and they have such a great location in the middle of Spearfish, South Dakota. It is definitely something that the town loves and folks visit year over year. So here I'm going from a small town in Wyoming to, a much larger town that also hosts a lot of visitors coming through, people on their summer vacations. So communication about this was a lot easier. Signs were posted. We did social media. And they also host a music event on Wednesdays. And so having signage at those events. So a lot of people coming here just were drop in, passing by as they're viewing the grounds and coming in. And each week I choose a different subject. So this week on the left here, so there were apple trees planted, probably turn of the century, 1900 timeframe, that are still providing fruit. It's probably not the best fruit, but we were doing some investigation with our nature journaling on the apples, milkweed, a couple other flowers were in bloom in that July timeframe. So we were doing these sessions every Wednesday. So I did 4 sessions, and those were from 10 a.m. to noon. It kept keeping it early in the day because the heat would potentially get a little too warm. So this is such an interesting location out here in South Dakota. Not only was it a historic fish hatchery, they still do provide fish for waterways in the area, but they also have the National Fish and Aquatic Conservation Archives. Guys, this was where my inner nerd just had a blast going through the archives. And those 2 pictures are at the top right, going through some of their all of the things that are just housed from across the country get sent there. Lots of paperwork, lots of physical objects. The ware on the right-hand side was used in the train car. So the picture on the left is one of the original photos of the train car that transported fish across the country to feed the population in the late 1800s. This is not the original train car in the bottom right. It is a replica, but inside it is so well done and restored, and a great feature for this um, fish hatchery to keep folks coming back and touring the grounds. So I was able to work with the museum staff to get some copies of those historic photos, and that is what I used for my work this time. This is another example of the historic photos. This was a boat, the Yellowstone boat, used on Lake Yellowstone. So they would transport this boat each year via wagon train out to Northwest Wyoming, um, harvest some fish eggs, etc., bring it back to South Dakota. And so this is that boat in action. My third artist in residence, as I mentioned, was at Bridger Teton National Forest. So I was there for a longer period of time because it was that hybrid role. This is something that the Forest Service, this particular forest, has never done before. So I was the first, and I loved being back in this beautiful place. This picture, I think, summarizes the entire experience. Just to be in this beautiful location, creating and working with people, and just spreading the joy of taking it all in a different way, not hiking, not biking, but being observational and meditative. So we ended up doing 6 sessions. They were on Wednesdays in the afternoon. And one of our challenges was, how do you market this type of a workshop for a forest that covers 3.6 million acres? It stretches from the top of Wyoming down to the um, Utah border. We did focus on one of the districts. There are 6 districts in the forest. We focused on the Jackson district, which of course is where the money is. So we were able to get a couple grants as well for supplies. And part of my role was considering how to build a program to continue year over year. And so I am going to continue the conversation with the forest in January to hopefully host another artist next year. So we'll see. As you may know, the hitch with federal agencies is that there can be a reliance on budgets. So we're going to see how that plays out for 2025. Not only did I do photography, but I've also incorporated illustration here. So this is Green River Lakes, another beautiful spot in the forest, and working through those dark skies. I was there during the Perseid meteor shower in August, and I continued to see shooting stars throughout my time, those 10 weeks in Bridger Teton. A little bit about the process of the photo embroidery pieces. I would start, well, first, obviously, I would start with taking the photos, and then I would bring those babies into Lightroom, then use Photoshop as needed. I would create the design patterns in Illustrator, and then use InDesign with master pages to set up the template for each of the pieces. So that was feeding my body of work. And then the nature journaling piece was, I wish I could really put into words how amazing those experiences were. And sometimes I would just sit back and laugh, and I would, my attendees would say, like, that sounded very Bob Ross of you. Um, I was so thrilled with taking a moment out of the classroom environment. And this, I didn't feel that I was really teaching, but I was supporting people through a journey of learning, of investigating, of being present. And that helped me reset. And I think that is going to help as I move forward with my classes. I've been teaching in the classroom, so to speak, classroom since 2002, been online teaching since 2017. And suspending the critique and suspending some rigor and rubrics was really a great reset. And so part of it is also thinking about the outside um, park service unit or public land unit and allowing people to use it in a different way. And I was really trying to speak to that as I was promoting this with the people that were organizing the workshops and the artists in residence, that it's not hiking. It's not going to be ATV use. It's not going to be Bridger Teton National Forest has a significant amount of horseback riding, largest wilderness area, most remote in the lower 48. So people are doing their hunting out there. And that's great. That's what our public lands are for. But they're also for our enjoyment, and this is another way that we can get to that, by being inspired by what we're seeing in a really focused way. So specifically ahead of each session, I would do some research on a plant species. Right here is a beautiful little flower called milk vetch. I think there's something like 100 species in that Wyoming, Montana area. I couldn't figure out which specific species it was. But as far as doing some research, we'd talk about its use in the environment. Then we'd talk about form and color and a couple other observational techniques. And so some of the other plants that I took a look at were yucca. So Bighorn Canyon was a high desert, so it had prickly pear and yucca. The yucca was in bloom at the time. Perfect timing. Like I said previously, the apples and the milkweeds, and of course at Bridger Teton National Forest, the aspens, the pine, and then at the hatchery, I also did a rainbow trout abstract piece, and that was really helpful for people to start to understand what a wet on wet technique was. I personally never watercolored before like 2 years ago. I am still new to the medium, but it was a great place to mesh this inspiration and learning a little bit of technique, but really being present and observational. That's definitely the word that I would use is it was a great medium for quick entry and allowing people to have that observation. It's an easy medium that has great access for all levels. So I've got a kiddo here. A lot of kiddos would come to the spearfish. And so these palettes also were helpful with these multiple colors for a, a, a lot of kids to use and beginners. We don't have to delve into all of the color theory or how to mix paints because it just has so many options. But we did talk a little bit about the color theory. I also can't stop, won't stop, did some cyanotype in when I got to Wyoming. And when all was said and done, I made about 20 photo embroidery pieces. I created a thank you card for the gift shop at DC Booth National Historic Fish Hatchery. I also did 4 magnet designs, so bringing in the other business. And I made way too many cyanotypes. I collected a lot of flowers while I was out there, and served about 125 people in the 12 watercolor sessions. Not only that, there were some fun adventures all over that beautiful state of Wyoming and South Dakota. I met Wild Bill Hickok. And as far as what's next, I'm going to be doing another artist in residence at the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. That is going to be next spring outside of Las Vegas. And I am going to be a presenter at the Craftcation Conference, which will be in April in Ventura, doing the watercolor nature journaling. So I'm very excited about that. And then I will also be going back to the trade show at the Public Lands Alliance, and I have pitched watercoloring there. We've talked about doing it on the rooftop. that would be amazing. So fingers crossed. And so that's what's on the horizon. And I really appreciate your time. I am here for all of your questions, be it artist in residence or how to with public lands, volunteering, or life on the road as an RVer.
Thank you so much. This is really cool, Jessica. Thank you so much. And I want to take a workshop.
Thank you. Yes, we'll get it on the books.
Yeah, anybody have any questions for sure? Kendall says she loves cyanotype. You've done cyanotypes before, huh?
Sorry, I'm
Oh,
a
no, you're
photographer,
good.
so cyanotype is like kind of my preferred medium. I do more like traditional darkroom stuff where I prefer that. So the cyanotypes I love. But I was gonna ask, when you are like printing and embroidering, like are you printing your own? What type of paper are you printing on? Did you have to experiment with that for a while to figure out what worked best?
I did, absolutely. So have settled on Canon luster paper.
Mm.
I use, let me see if I have it right here. I Okay, so I have this kind of like foam piece, and I put the paper on top of it, and I use an awl to punch the dots through for the pattern. It creases very slightly, but you're still going to be like bending when you're punching the paper and drawing the thread through with the needle. It's not the it works. I really like it. It does what I needed to do.
So the backing, when you punch it through, like it's like it grabs it so it doesn't crease.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
Okay.
So like this foam is fairly rigid. It's some of that packing materials, but it's easy to pierce.
Very cool.
Hi, thanks for sharing all your
Yeah,
stuff. I'm curious about the camper life, the RV life, right?
absolutely.
Me
What
So
too.
is,
here I
so,
am. I
I think
blur it
about,
out.
I'm in a stationary, homeowner, and so I think about some of the annoying stuff that are sort of commonplace with that, like mowing the lawn and
Mhm.
fixing the sink, whatever. So what are some of the things about RV life that are challenging?
Great question. When I leapt, I had never towed anything in my life before. I was at the shop and I asked for backup lessons. The fellas there, they gave me two backup lessons and then they said, okay, have a nice day. Um, so maybe a little bit of mm, practice would have helped. I backed into a boulder like my first quarter of living in the RV. That's why we have insurance. Uh, but to your point, the sink is going to break. Things happen. I have previously bent a lot of axles. One axle was a manufacturer's defect. A wheel has come off. Um, and I think all of that, I generally I want to believe that which does not kill you makes you stronger. Um, Despite all of that, like those are the things like yeah, your home might spring a leak or you might have to replace something. It's the same in a way. I kind of mentally keep those even. But my window to the outdoors and access to a hiking trail is right outside my door, and I can change that. If I don't love my neighbors, I can roll. And that's never happened. I've always really enjoyed my neighbors. Most people keep to themselves in campgrounds, but I've made a friend here. I'm at Chatfield State Park right now. Um, I I also love Bear Creek Lake Park, being close to Denver for when I'm here. My address is Denver. I also have an address in South Dakota. We're not going to talk about that. Um, but I we can talk offline. Um, I I love how I have everything so close. We were talking about the embroidery piece, and I could just reach over. Um, would I love a door to close? Yes. I think that's the one thing that I wish I had. And there are RVs that have doors that can close and you don't have to look at your work all the time. But I have a 26-foot travel trailer. Um, the bedroom is in the front. I have a one large slide. So it's about a 10-foot slide, 10 by 3 feet, which really opens up the space. And I've got my laser cutter and a table that moonlights as a place for production and eating. And then I have a desk here in the back with my sink and kitchen over here. What other questions you have, don't hesitate to ask.
What are you using for internet?
Oh,
Starlink?
so last year I finally got Starlink, and that was a game changer. I was using um, Wi-Fi, a MiFi, um, for about 5 years. Some of the parks will have Wi-Fi, some don't. When I was volunteering at Big Bend, I totally like got phone service to use a modem, so they offered that as a service. Um, that they certainly had no cell service. So
Awesome. I have so many more questions too. Todd, is this something you're thinking of doing? Is becoming a RVer too?
I there's a lot of work that would go into that. So I would say probably not, but it sounds enticing.
It is, it does.
I mean, I prefer being in the mountains.
yes, yes. And that's part of my hurdle is that I want them all. I can't have that. But this way I can go from one town to the next and still enjoy it. At this point in my travels, I like to stay longer in places. When I was doing the week to week, it was rigorous. Um, Great. I got to see a lot of our state, up to Wyoming and Montana. I was doing shows down to Tucson. But now I really do just prefer to tuck in, get to know a community, get to know some people, and see how things work. What else?
When you were doing stuff in Montana, where were you up there?
I did an art show in Whitefish,
Okay,
and
awesome.
I loved it. And that's part of, okay, right? Like this is part of it is that you get to go and apply to shows that you want to in places that you want to go. I had never been up there. I totally wanted to see Glacier. Um, and I just incorporated that into my plan. Um, I still want to get out to the West Coast. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. It's not as easy, but yes. So staying up in Whitefish. I was in West Yellowstone area for a little bit. Um, yeah.
How about your laser? One more like question, art for art, but what about your laser cut stuff? Are you still going to do that or focus more on the embroidery and the photos?
So I'm I'm torn. I It depends on the day that you ask me, because some days I'm like, I don't want to do
Artist.
it anymore. But it's how people know me. Um, and so going to trade shows, I have, this very specific look and feel to my work. Um, and I'm thinking about how my booth is going to look in February when I go to the Public Lands Alliance. I want my walls to be all of the photo embroidery pieces, having some finished pieces, and a kit. And so I'm working through putting
Oh,
together kits, and the table will probably have the wood goods. So my laser work is all wood, and there are limitations that I have. I want to keep things small for thinking about tourists and visitors to these places are traveling, so they might not have luggage space to have a large piece. So that's my focus with my wood is it's more geared towards a tourism industry.
It's being an artist. Like, you know, we change so often and then we love what we love and then we feel compelled to do. But yeah, definitely do what your heart says for sure.
Yes. I mean, I love my clients. I'm thankful for people being my patrons, and I don't want to like pull the rug out from under them. So
I love the kid idea too. That's really cool.
thank you. Right. It has legs.
It does. All right. Any other questions for Jess? Jess, thank you so much for doing this. This was amazing. I look forward to sending this out later this week and putting this recording in the hub. I'm going to stop recording.